60% of attacks have identity as a key component, meaning that without the identity piece, the attack would have never happened. And probably 80 to 90% involve identity in some way or another. And so like this identity crisis has been going on for several years, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, our customers and identity practitioners out there haven't found an easy button to fix it. And that's where we stand today in this identity crisis that we live in.
I think you just summarized perfectly this whole identity security space and why it exists and why it's so important. You've talked about Security-First IAM, and I want to know from your perspective, what does that mean?
Yeah, so Security-First IAM, and if you missed it, last week we announced Duo Identity Access Management, and so Security-First IAM is really the reason why we did it. We felt that most of the IAM or identity players out there in the market were more focused on like helping people get to work and get access to the things they need and single sign-on or reducing friction, which is all really good, useful stuff. But security has always been sort of an afterthought, an add-on on the back burner. To us, the Duo Security-First IAM is really about making security the default, secure by default, making so that you can start from day zero with no passwords, make it really easy to go passwordless, and doing that all within kind of the cost envelope of the base tier. So that's what we mean by Security-First IAM, is like we're making that security set of capabilities part of the basic functionality.
Okay. And so what do you say to the pessimist who says, oh, another identity solution? We have a bunch of identity solutions. What's going to be different here?
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great, man. Glad to be back in the home office and excited for this episode.
Yeah, this is a good one. We got a sponsored episode today brought to us by our friends over at Duo, and you can find more about them at duo.com. We're going to welcome back a guest here in a second, but just to make it very crystal clear, right? They've sponsored this entire episode. So we do these from time to time in collaboration with our sponsors to help apprise the industry of some of the things that they should be thinking about from I guess I should say people in the industry about what they should be thinking about from an identity standpoint, security standpoint, and some of the capabilities that are out there that people might want to take a look at. I trip over my own tongue right now. So let me go ahead and get right into it. Let's introduce Matt Caulfield. He's the VP of Duo and Identity at Cisco. All things identity. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
All right. Thank you, Jeff and Jim. Good to see you guys again. Happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been a little while. So I think the last time you were on was episode number 247. We talked, I called the episode Big Areas of Identity to Solve, right? It was very thought-provoking. I will encourage people to go back and listen to that because I'm not going to make you say, how did you get into identity? You've already answered that. You're a pro's pro for us. But it's been about a year and a half since then. So what have you been up to over that last year and a half?
Yeah, what's new? A lot. So, came back to Cisco about 2 years ago with the Ort acquisition. And then recently, about a year ago, I started as the head of product for Duo, which I think a lot of people, a lot of the listeners here in identity understand that Duo has a storied past in identity and authentication, and they know the Duo brand really well. And so I've been really happy to work with that team in particular. The Duo team is known in Cisco for its culture, for its ability to ship product, for its ability to be kind of market leading, focused on users. And so like, it's just been a real blessing to take over the leadership of the product team for Duo and help craft what we've been doing over the past year, which I'm also very excited to talk about.
Yeah, real excited to talk about it, Matt. And I was going to quote something that I've heard you say, which is that we have an identity crisis in this space. And, you know, when you hear identity crisis, obviously it has, you know, there's other meanings outside of digital identity. So I'm assuming you mean a digital identity crisis. And I'm wondering, what is it that's contributing to this crisis? Why is that a major theme?
Yeah, no, your assumption is right that it is a digital identity crisis and not so much like a personal, like existential identity crisis, although some of us have those. digital identity crisis, it's really a couple of things. One piece is the rise in identity-based attacks, and I feel like we've been talking about this for years, but it's still happening, so we're still talking about it. Fortunately, now at Cisco, I get access to all this like really cool data. So we have this whole team called Cisco Talos, and they go out and they study these things. They deal with things like incident response and looking at threats out in the wild. And one thing that they've picked up on is that now it's not 60% of attacks involve identity. 60% of attacks have identity as a key component, meaning that without the identity piece, the attack would have never happened. And probably 80 to 90% involve identity in some way or another. And so like this identity crisis has been going on for several years, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, our customers and identity practitioners out there haven't found an easy button to fix it. And that's where we stand today in this identity crisis that we live in.
I think you just summarized perfectly this whole identity security space and why it exists and why it's so important. You've talked about Security-First IAM, and I want to know from your perspective, what does that mean?
Yeah, so Security-First IAM, and if you missed it, last week we announced Duo Identity Access Management, and so Security-First IAM is really the reason why we did it. We felt that most of the IAM or identity players out there in the market were more focused on like helping people get to work and get access to the things they need and single sign-on or reducing friction, which is all really good, useful stuff. But security has always been sort of an afterthought, an add-on on the back burner. To us, the Duo Security-First IAM is really about making security the default, secure by default, making so that you can start from day zero with no passwords, make it really easy to go passwordless, and doing that all within kind of the cost envelope of the base tier. So that's what we mean by Security-First IAM, is like we're making that security set of capabilities part of the basic functionality.
Okay. And so what do you say to the pessimist who says, oh, another identity solution? We have a bunch of identity solutions. What's going to be different here?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get that a lot. For a long time, Duo has been known as MFA, and like it's kind of built into the name, like 2FA, MFA. And for the longest time, Duo has been really good at that. We have over 100,000 customers. They use us for MFA. There are lots of other identity solutions. So you might ask, and other people have asked the question, like, why would Duo get into the identity space? And a big part of it is because we saw that gap in that there are still attacks going on. They're still being successful. Traditional players are more focused on making single sign-on and access management work and less focused on the security aspects to it. So we saw the need to come in with kind of security-first approach. And the way that Duo is special is some of the end-to-end phishing resistance capabilities that we brought in addition to the security-first capabilities, really sets it apart from a lot of the other options that are out there, plus the reasons why people pick Duo today, which is it's a solution that our customers love because it focuses on the intersection of usability and security for admins and for end users.
You know, I'm playing the role that Jeff normally plays, which is like the pessimist, but you know, I've seen over time, I've been in this space for 20 years, and I was a big customer of both Oracle and CA, and I usually don't name drop in like any kind of negative light, but the big tech industry has kind of a history of going deep into acquiring different pieces of identity, of the identity stack, putting them together, and then R&D dies on the vine. And so, you know, given that history, that none of that implicates you, but given that history, what would you say? That's not going to happen again?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Cisco makes a lot of acquisitions. You mentioned like the number 247 episodes. Cisco's done about 250 acquisitions over its history. So it's a lot. You know, it averages, you know, around 10 per year over the past few years, give or take a few. Over time, those acquisitions get brought in and made part of the bigger portfolio with Duo and with Ort in particular. So we acquired a Duo 6 years ago, still going today. We're still investing. We're still making big launches, and we're still just as relevant as ever in the industry, especially in the authentication market. And then with Ort, which I was part of. I was the founder and CEO there, and we were an identity threat detection response company that was acquired 2 years ago. We've now made that part of Duo and identity intelligence, and we're continuing to invest in those capabilities. And we just announced a new capability as part of identity intelligence as well, which is this trust scoring mechanism that lets you pinpoint individual users and figure out which ones are actually compromised inside your organization. So you could have like 10,000 users, and this will narrow it down to like, hey, these 3 accounts, you need to go scrub those. Like, it's almost like a laptop. You need to go wipe that laptop or that account and start over again, because those are definitely taken over at this point. So anyway, just some examples of Cisco does bring in companies and make them part of the bigger story, but at the same time continues to invest where it's needed, especially in areas of identity, because there's this realization that identity is a core pillar of security. It's the foundation of zero trust, and the whole industry has woken up to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I recognize anyway is, when you talk about ORT, you guys were kind of an innovator and a leading company, and now look, you're as an individual running the show there in terms of Duo identity. That's pretty telling. I mean, are you bringing with you that culture of innovation that you had? Or let's talk about that for a minute. It was kind of that transition you made from, founder and CEO at ORT, and now you're a part of a bigger tech company. Did you bring the innovation, or was it like you came over and were like, wow, this is a really innovative company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you're picking up on a pattern that does exist, and it's not just me. Like, plenty of other founders get acquired into Cisco and then get put into bigger roles, bigger responsibility, expressly for the value that they bring in terms of driving urgency and bringing in new ideas and innovation. And it's not because Cisco lacks that at all. It's just really helpful to have new, fresh ideas constantly coming in, and that's one of the ways that bigger Cisco and now Duo has done it, is kind of bringing in talent through acquisition. So myself, we've had other leaders, just in the year that I was acquired, like ArmorBlocks was acquired on the email side, and DJ Sampath is running a lot of the AI strategy now for Cisco overall. So G2 Patel, who's our chief product officer and president at Cisco now, is really creating this culture of, we need to think like a startup, even though we're a gigantic 100,000 person company. Like, we need to think like a startup, act like a startup, and bring startup people in order to drive and continue to drive urgency.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the answer I was expecting, because, when you talked about something like Talos, I started to think, wow, like, imagine having the insights that they have, and you can just sit down and have coffee with the people that are making it happen there. Tell us a little bit about Talos and some of that intelligence that they're bringing to the table that's influencing, look, you guys are taking on some big, bold stuff. And it sounds like that having that intelligence was kind of at the center of making some of these decisions.
It is. So understanding what's really going on for customers on their worst days when they're suffering from security breaches is the type of insights that the Talos team brings to the table. And that team has existed for a while, also came in through acquisition, I believe through the SourceFire acquisition, which was one of our firewalls that we acquired. So that continues to this day. And they've expanded from like just a focus on networking and network intelligence and network focused response into also things like understanding what's going on in the identity world, just because that's such a big aspect of the breaches that are occurring. It's a key component, and that's really the research that we're highlighting here. And it's not just this year or just Talos saying it. We've seen kind of corroborating evidence coming from like Verizon DPIR and some of the research that CrowdStrike puts out. So it's definitely not just us who are into it. But yes, I kind of get an inside track on getting the real details on what's happening in these attacks and what are the vectors through which these attackers are coming in, so that we can build controls and detections into our products, into Duo, into identity intelligence, to put a stop to that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, so to me, the two interesting angles would be that piece, which is all the other companies within Cisco or products, however you want to, call the structure. But then also the customer insights that you must be getting, being able to come into customer conversations. And I'm wondering, like, what are some of the challenges you're seeing? Are you coming into clients and finding a lot of laggards? Are you seeing some clients that are just like, innovating in ways that you're learning from? Kind of what are you seeing in that landscape?
Yeah, customer insights are at a totally different scale at Cisco. So Duo alone has over 100,000 customers. So much as I'd like to, I can't talk to all of them in a single lifetime. Even so, we rely a lot on data and then select, customer interviews. We just held one of our first Duo customer advisory boards, strategic advisory boards in New York a few weeks ago, and that was really insightful because we got to sit down with 20 customers and really dig in a bit more into the problems that they're having in identity. And the common themes are things like phishing resistance. How do I get to passwordless? How do I deal with like non-employee populations, like contractors, a little bit of non-human identity, a little bit of agentic popping up, and we can maybe say that for the end. But these are the things that are kind of top of mind for our customers, and going from what they have today, which might be like a mishmash of different identity technologies, to an architecture that they feel confident in from a security perspective. That's really what they look into a Cisco Duo for, is like, okay, help me with these specific projects like phishing resistance and like passwordless. And then also help me think bigger picture of like, how do I tie this whole identity thing into my zero trust initiative, my zero trust architecture? And Cisco's really well positioned to help with both those things, those kind of tactical things, as well as the strategic bigger picture, because we have this much broader portfolio.
Yeah, whenever we get a thought leader like yourself on, I wanted to ask some questions that are like, maybe sound basic, but are we solved? You brought up passwordless. Is authentication more or less solved and now it's just tactical getting it rolled out? Or is there still innovation to be had?
I think there's still innovation to be had. So if you look at it, how do you get to like NIST, AAL3, phishing resistance today? Usually you have to go buy a bunch of hardware tokens. And I have no issue with the folks who manufacture hardware tokens. They're a good product and I use them myself. But for organizations, when they're staring down, a $50 per token price tag, and then having to provide 2 of them for everybody in case they lose one, like, it's a really hard pill to swallow for most organizations that aren't, maybe financial services, let's say. So that in particular is an area of innovation where Duo, with recent announcements around end-to-end phishing resistance, we've stepped into. We've announced this thing called proximity verification, where you can get AAL3 phishing resistant authentication, where your phone is your key. You've got Duo Mobile on the phone. It's using Bluetooth Low Energy between the phone and the device. And by virtue of them being near each other and the fact that I've registered both devices, my laptop and my phone, and by virtue of me doing a Face ID or Touch ID on my device, I now have enough factors to say, okay, this is phishing resistant, and an attacker would need to be in the room with me, kind of pulling up a chair to my desk in order to insert themselves in the flow. So there is innovation in authentication still.
That's good to hear, because it's not like the threats stop innovating either, right? So you kind of have to stay ahead of it as well.
Yeah, and we do see the attackers continuing to innovate. But we thought MFA was the silver bullet for the longest period of time, where MFA, as long as you have MFA on your account, like, you're good, you're golden. But then we have things like SIM swapping, or even more basic like push bombing, push fatigue, and so then we move to like number matching and OTP and other one-time codes, and then you have attacker in the middle where they create a proxy and put it in the middle so it looks like your sign-in page, and you put in your 4-digit or 6-digit code, and then they steal that. And so we're constantly being pushed further and further towards eventually getting to where we are now with phishing resistant. And hope is that this new Duo proximity verification capability is sort of the easy, cheaper way to get to phishing resistant versus shipping everybody their own little hardware key.
I want to talk about the product here in a second, but I'm curious what your thoughts are from a AI perspective and some of the threats that we're seeing, with using AI to leverage against some of the identity security that maybe we've built out over the decades. Gone is the poorly written email from the poor Nigerian prince. And now it is a very well-crafted, very believable, text or message or whatever it may be that AI is really empowering the other side, right, to be better at that. How do you see AI impacting identity security, as it stands today? And then what scares you the most when you start to think about these types of things, and how you're going to defend against it or help others defend against it?
Yeah, of course. I think it's twofold, right? There's one piece of it, which is like, how do we think about identity for AI? And like agentic identity or agentic AI is almost like a human identity in that it's somebody that your organization hires and you need to give an identity to them. Let's set that aside for a second because that's probably its own kind of can of worms, which we can get to. The more pressing thing right now is AI has enabled attackers to do social engineering at scale. So they can find and literally use tools like ChatGPT and say, hey, go find me all the profiles on LinkedIn who have like a Microsoft certification for Entra ID, and they look like they've been in the industry for a few years, so they're probably a global admin, and help me figure out like their home phone number so I can try to call them up and convince them to turn over their OTP, or convince maybe their help desk to allow me to add my phone to their account so I can sign in as the attacker. And then once I do that, maybe I'll set up federation with my own IDP so that I can persist in their environment and continue to log into their apps. Like those types of social engineering at scale and kind of doing the research part, intelligence part, just got a lot easier because like every individual attacker now has an army of bots, chat bots that they can go out and say, hey, do the research for me to figure out who I should go after and where the soft targets are, and then even help me get in the front door. So you're kind of screening those targets. It's almost like hiring, right? You're like using an army of people to go find like good candidates and then screening them, except it's an attacker going and trying to find candidates or victims, really.
I maybe I'm one of those people who's just like taking in all the hype, but I heard a recent one, I think it was OpenAI, is hiring 1,000 developers, and those 1,000 developers will each manage 1,000 AI developers. So essentially, they're going to have 1 million developers if you do the math and you believe the hype. I mean, are you guys leveraging AI in a way that you kind of like are now able to build the product faster, ship enhancements quicker, things like that? Does that resonate with you?
It does. I think the most immediate thing that comes to mind is that we just shipped the Duo AI assistant. So if you're logging into the Duo admin console, there's an AI assistant there that you can ask questions to. So like, hey, why, Jeff's having trouble logging into his account. Why can't Jeff log in? And the AI assistant will go and kind of virtually click around the admin console. It's really talking to the API, but it's figuring out like, okay, what was Jeff's last error message? Why did that happen? Was it a policy? Was it some issue with the device he was coming from? Figure out what the issue was and then kind of spit out an answer. It's like, okay, Jeff couldn't log in because he was coming from an unregistered device. Something like that. Getting to those answers really quickly is a benefit that we see AI providing to Duo admin so that it can answer questions about how to set up the product or how to troubleshoot really easily and kind of right at their fingertips. And then internally, we're also using AI for a whole slew of things. I think everybody is. Content's a good example. It makes it easier to write documentation for the product. It makes it easier to do a little bit of like market research. And then of course, on the actual software engineering side, Cisco's software engineering practice has kind of fully embraced AI and is trying to leverage it as much as possible to maximize kind of its efficacy for speeding up the software development process.
That's such a super cool use of AI. I love being able to like say, okay, let me log in as an admin and say, okay, well, why doesn't Jeff work? Right? Rather than hunting around and pecking through. Now that might be a more existential question, but let's just focus on me not being able to authenticate, for that scenario. So talk to me a little bit about, I guess, Duo from a product perspective. And, is Duo shifting kind of the mindset here? It sounds like it maybe to a more broader identity and access management, or is it, you still focus on the authentication space? Like, where do you see Duo kind of fitting today? Because everybody likes to be put into a box, right? Are you authentication? Are you IGA? Are you PAM? What is Duo today, and where do you think it'll be, in the next few years?
Yeah, I think I can answer that with it is a repositioning of Duo, really. Historically, whether we like it or not, the perception of Duo has been MFA, and that's been a blessing and a curse because Duo is MFA and MFA is Duo. It's almost in the name, like I said earlier. This is really a repositioning and reinvention of what Duo is to our customers. It's not just multi-factor authentication. It's not just how you add MFA to your accounts. It's still that. And like we do that really well, exceptionally well. But this is the expansion of what Duo is into Duo identity and access management. We're really entering that broader IAM market and tying that to the broader Cisco portfolio in a big way, which is our broader strength as a company. So it is a more of a revolution than an evolution of how you think about Duo.
So I've always noticed that Duo is very sticky with the organizations, which is a real testament, I think, to the use case that it's been solved traditionally right on the MFA side. You see a lot of organizations that have an IDP that has MFA capability, but they like Duo and they just stay with it. I'm curious from a product standpoint, given how your customers maybe have measured success in the past around this, might have been, enrollments or things like that, a number of MFA prompts, things, whatever that might be. How do you see that shifting in the future as part of this, evolution of the Duo sort of identity security stack?
Yeah, I think that how we measure success is an important question. It's one that we hold our product management team to. We have lots of individual contributor product managers, and the question for them is, okay, you want to build this feature. What is the metric of success? And so the metric of success for this launch that we've done and for our customers who are starting to adopt these features, especially on the passwordless front, it's almost the inverse, which is how many authentications have we saved because we're now gone passwordless? How can we make it so that each individual on average has one or fewer authentications, interactive authentications per day? And so the ideal kind of dream state scenario is you walk into your office, you put your phone down on your desk next to your laptop or your desktop, whatever you're using. You log into the operating system through this kind of proximity verification that I described earlier, and then you're on with your day. You don't need to, when you log into your browser or that browser or the client, you need to go through another interactive auth. You've already established, like, Matt's in his office in front of his computer, like, let's just go. And I think that is now our metric of success. So Cisco itself, Cisco IT, rolled this out with Duo over the past couple of years. They get early access to all the things that we build. And we're now at a point where the number of authentications for employees are less than 5 per week per employee on average. And like that is a major win. For me personally, as an employee here at Cisco, it's great. Like that user experience is really good. But it's a big win for Duo and for the Cisco customer base more broadly.
I love that prox card, and really what the description you made there kind of reminds me is like continuous authentication that can happen in the background. And it's more than just, logging in and you walk away, someone pops into your cube and does this, that, or the other. You can really use the technology that you're talking about to prevent a scenario like that. And the reason I chimed in was I wanted to ask, is your IAM solution going to be focused on that workforce internal population, or is it going to be the customer side, or both?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are plenty of good solutions out there for the customer side. Plenty of awesome startups in that space as well that we talk to frequently. What we've launched here is for 2 major use cases. One is workforce, but then there's also extended workforce and B2B. We have a ton of customers using Duo for partners, contractors, vendors, third parties, and how they log in to solutions inside the environment. We do have some customer IAM use cases that are more on the B2B side than the traditional SIAM stuff that you would expect. So, for example, you can imagine that if I'm building a SaaS product, which is more infrastructure focused, and so that I have like admins who need to log into it, we've seen Duo embedded for those use cases as well, where you want to provide a really easy to adopt kind of MFA for privileged access for certain types of infrastructure. Oftentimes we'll see Duo used for access to like network devices because Cisco is like, hey, I need to SSH into that router or that switch over there to change the configuration on it, and update the routing table, whatever. I will often put Duo in line for those types of use cases as well. So yeah, really workforce, extended workforce, and a sprinkle of kind of B2B SIAM as well.
I love this idea of proximity-based authentication. I think this is something that it's not new. It's been around for a little bit. I can think of like Windows has had it built in for a little while, but frankly, it hasn't really worked very well for from when I've tried to use it. Talk to me a little about this idea of proximity-based authentication. Is it I enroll my phone and I sit down and there is a Bluetooth beacon, whether it's in the laptop or maybe some sort of add-on or something that is picking that up? Can I use something other than a phone to authenticate that same way? Like maybe a ring? I wear a smart ring, or maybe an Apple Watch or something else like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way that this proximity verification works is, it's exactly right. It is Bluetooth low energy. So you do have the laptop kind of beaconing out or broadcasting out a cryptographically signed nonce that is specific to the user and their phone. And so your phone will pick up on that when it senses, hey, I'm getting this Bluetooth low energy signal. It's this nonce. It's for me in particular. And then it will allow you to then use the phone to prove that it's you. And the kind of dance between the phone and the laptop allows you to then log into the operating system or into the application that you're trying to access. This is great because unlike other solutions that rely on like GPS, for example, like that's not very reliable, or it relies on IP address, also not reliable, easily spoofed, both of those. You can't really spoof being in the same kind of radio frequency distance, within like 20-ish feet of the laptop. So like that is fairly unique compared to these other approaches for proximity that have been tried in the past. We're relying on the physical medium between the two of them. And yeah, we're not stopping here. Like this is one of many kind of frictionless experiences that we're providing for authentication, but there's a whole set of other problems to solve, especially in spaces like retail and healthcare, where you want to provide frictionless access to systems without having to take your phone out of your pocket, for example, where we're going to continue to innovate, and then everybody else will get the benefits of all of that. You mentioned like the Apple Watch in particular. Duo has an Apple Watch app on today, and as well as an Android Watch app, and you can use those today if you want to unlock or go through push-based authentication. I think we'll continue to see more innovation around that. Other areas that are interesting are like NFC, and trying to figure out if we want to do something in that space, or other types of like badge-based access. So more to come.
And this all strikes me as a really good way to get to that sort of passwordless nirvana that I think everybody's been trying to get to. And, you've got your phone or some sort of, possession-based authentication. It strikes me as very phishing resistance too, where, if it's based on especially proximity to something, it's going to be kind of hard to like phish if someone's sitting there in front of you and trying to block your, Bluetooth signals. Talk to me about phishing resistance and where does that play in sort of the strategy of rolling out things like proximity-based authentication, or maybe other methods that Duo is looking at too?
Yeah, so phishing resistance is really what's important here. We've seen phishing at every part of the user's journey, whether it's enrollment or it's operating system login, application login, mid-session security like session hijacking, or for recovery use cases. Attackers have phished every step of the way. So when we came out with phishing resistance, it wasn't enough to say, hey, we've got proximity verification now, like we're good. There's more to it. Like for enrollment, we had to go with identity verification. And so we're partnering on the kind of government ID based enrollment flow. So you can use your government ID and a selfie in order to enroll into an account. Same thing is true for help desk use cases and for recovery use cases. You use a government ID because you're now missing your phone that you're using before you. So you need a new kind of root of trust. And we just went through a whole hackathon with the California DMV to use verifiable credentials that the state issues in order to verify, oh, that's really you. You have a verifiable credential from the state of California, and you can prove it to me. That's a really cool way to bootstrap into the process as well. But once you're in it, then we can rely on these cool things like, okay, I'm in it. I've registered my laptop. I've registered my phone on my account. Both of those are trusted devices with some sort of certificate built into the TPM. So I know cryptographically it's really that device. And I know they're near each other. And I know that it's me log into the device because I have my fingerprint or my Face ID. Those kind of four factors really combine to make it phishing resistant, because at no point along the way there are you entering something in, whether a username, a password, or a code And at no point along the way in there is it easy to man in the middle or attacker in the middle between any step of that flow. And so like that's really what gets us to that phishing resistance for application and OS login. And then the last piece I want to mention is the mid-session security. So session hijacking. So great. You did all this work to go and build a kind of foolproof phishing resistant enrollment process and application login process. But what if the attacker is on your device and in your browser and they just steal your session cookie out of there? Like it was all for nothing because the session cookie is basically the credential at that point and it's easily phishable. It can be replayed no matter what device it's coming from. We've gotten rid of cookies. With this latest Duo announcement, we've gone to a cookieless architecture for our session management. So if you're logging in through Duo, you're not getting a cookie. You are setting up kind of cryptographic trust between your device and our backend, and then we're relying on that for subsequent authentication. So never is there a point in time where we're storing something that can be replayed in your browser such that an attacker could pull it out and put it into their own browser.
So you kind of stole my question that I was going to follow up with was that, how do you prevent session hijacking and man-in-the-middle attacks and kind of things like that? So you got that. So I'm going to pivot to something else.
Okay.
That Jim, I think, touched on earlier was around this idea of continuous identity or continuous authentication. It seems to me like this is another area where something like this could be very handy, and not just a point in time login, but as long as, I think I've heard it referred to as butts in seats or, something along those lines. It's like, as long as you are still in that same area, you're constantly emitting signals of some sort that say, yes, this is Jeff versus maybe, someone else who maybe has come over to that same device or something like that. How do you feel about that sort of idea of continuous authentication and leveraging those signals?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a few things that we do on that front, especially with posture. So for a long time, Duo has had Duo Health Agent, which is now part of Duo Desktop, that provides continuous posture signals from the device to the backend, such as if the posture changes or any aspect of what the user is trying to do changes, we can kill that session and force a reauthentication. Same thing is true with risk-based authentication. At the time of authentication, we're able to see, okay, here are these IP address, the geo information, the device information. And so we can say for each authentication for any application, like, all right, something's different here. Let's step up authentication or block entirely if it looks a little bit weird. So that's a piece. Risk-based authentication is part of this. The posture-based authentication is part of this. Identity intelligence is where we don't just get signals from Duo. Duo signals are great. We see a lot of information, but identity intelligence is able to pull information from your other identity providers, from Okta, from Entra, from you can pull data from your HR system. It can pull data from specific applications to really form a user 360 profile. And so we might get a much stronger signal on like a user trust score, so that if that score changes over time, we know that the reputation of that user's account isn't as trustworthy as it used to be. So that's important. And then to kind of pull all this together, we've invested a ton into shared signals. So SSF, the shared signals framework and the CAPE standard, we've been working with quite a few other companies in these Gartner IAM interops that they've been holding in order to understand, hey, does our solution work with your solution? So we work with like Signal, with App Omni, and we've shown like, yeah, there's real interoperability here when we all implement shared signals. And so even if Duo can't detect something today on its own, through shared signals, we can get signals from other providers that say, hey, it looks like something's fishy here, something's a little bit unusual. Maybe you should log the user out of their session or have them re-authenticate. We don't have to just solve the whole problem on our own. We can work with industry partners to build up a pretty robust solution that can find these kind of behavioral differences in terms of what users are doing.
That really pulls it all together from an identity security perspective. It's interesting, as you were talking, and I was off camera, I was thinking, man, it sounds a lot like the SASE framework, especially with the continuous authentication piece. So I went out, I Googled to try to, see if I could find a good, concise summary. The first result that came back was from Cisco. So there you go.
I guess our marketing team is doing a good job.
Yeah.
So SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, a big part of that is identity, but what most companies don't provide is the identity piece. A lot of the SASE vendors out there, they're just doing networking for you. It's like, hey, get my packets from point A to point B, not realizing like the foundation of zero trust is identity. So Cisco is literally the only solution in the industry that has an integrated identity stack now with our SASE solution. So you can take all that from Cisco and integrate super tightly, and you get end-to-end SASE with identity. So you establish trust using identity and then parlay that into the network. So you can then get access to just the resources that user or that IoT device or that agents running in the cloud need access to. That can all go through SASE backed by identity.
Well, you heard it here first. The thing I was talking about earlier, Matt, was kind of this whole innovation piece, R&D, and you brought up something about shared signals framework, and I was like, man, to me that's like where things are heading, and you must kind of see it the same way to say, because I wouldn't say it's like in the here and now. It kind of feels like the most innovative companies, it's in the here and now for them, but when you look at like most organizations, I don't think they're that far in terms of adopting CAPE in the signals framework. For you to be investing in that, that's really innovative. Talk to us a little bit about that and why you felt like that was important to invest in.
Yeah, so that, among other things, we're always trying to solve this kind of complex equation for where we should spend our kind of limited engineering bandwidth. And that's the problem that product management is tasked with solving, right? Is like, where should we spend limited resources? That one in particular, I think, is super important for two reasons. One is we need that internally. So Cisco has dozens of products that need to share signals about identities all the time. For a long time, Identity Services Engine, which is a product that I'm familiar with here at Cisco, is how we tied identity into the network. And they had a publish subscribe mechanism called PX Grid, which does pretty much exactly that. And shared signals we see as a kind of natural successor or complementary technology to how that technology operated. So for a long time, we've known like you need this kind of shared bus to share identity signals. So like that's nothing new. But yeah, back to your question of like, how do we continue to innovate in the face of all these different technologies? It's really the ones that drive our connectivity into what a customer might have. So things that really work with other things in the industry. And that's very much because that's how Duo has always operated. We are sort of an ecosystem player. We understand we are not just an island in a much bigger industry. We integrate with other solutions in identity, other solutions in networking. And so it's really important that we do invest our limited engineering bandwidth into building stronger bridges so that we can do more with them, not just, SAML, but also OIDC and SCIM and SFF and so on and so on. Like, we need to make sure that these bridges are really strong and we invest in the protocols that make them possible. Maybe model context protocol is the next one. Who knows?
So you can kind of tell I dropped the pessimistic angle about a half hour ago, right? I'm literally sitting here thinking we should be paying Matt for being on here with us and like sharing this knowledge. So I'm going to pick your brain a little bit more. What should we be thinking about as the identity practitioners are listening to you? What should we be thinking about for the future?
Yeah, I think the future is hard to predict. This phishing resistance thing, even though we're talking about it here and now, is like, it's going to be a long road, but we got to start implementing that. That's really important. If we want to see that 60% number drop down to, below 50 and hopefully closer to like 10 or 0, the investment in passwordless, phishing resistant, biometric based, cryptographically secure passwordless, like, I can't emphasize that enough. Like, there's the here and now, and we've got the tools now to go and do it. And that's really important. But if we look out and put on, our goggles for what's happening 5 to 10 years in the future, there's a lot of interesting innovation happening, both in terms of human identity, but in terms of machine and agentic identity. And they're all super interesting. Machine identity is it's been up and down the hype curve like a few different times. I think it's like ping-ponging back and forth about whether there's a real market there and enough to go after. I think there is. There's such a need for strongly identifying and authenticating devices, not just when they connect to the network, but also when they go and access resources, and whether they're devices or workloads. There's a ton of innovation that's required around machine identity. Same thing's going to be true for agentic identity. If I'm hiring a team of 10 agents to do various things for me, I need to give them identities. I need to figure out what permissions I can delegate to them and when to delegate them to them, and then let them have the connectivity to go and access resources, but really closely watch what they're doing with the access that I gave them so I can quickly take it away. I think the thing that's really interesting is, you can corrupt a person maybe by bribing them or figuring out what their intentions are and manipulating them. Agents, it's just like so much easier. It's like their value system is written in plain English, and they're easy to corrupt in such a way that we need to worry about the insider threat thing all over again, because each agent has the potential to easily become an insider threat just because it read like a weird PDF at some point in the past day. It's like, oh, it accidentally read this PDF and now it's malicious. Like that doesn't happen to people, it happens to agents. And it's just bananas. And I think that's a really interesting problem to solve from an identity perspective, because it gets to like, yeah, that agent is who it says it is. It still is. We can still authenticate. It still has that certificate. But like, it's gone off the walls. It's crazy. we need to shut down what it can do. Those problems around agentic identity and agentic AI are fun to think about. I think we'll see how much of it really comes to fruition. But I'm pretty excited about that in particular.
I mean, there was a whole movie about this called The Matrix. So we've got Neo and, Agent Smith. And if you think about it, both are agentic AIs kind of battling each other, right, through all the different levels of the Matrix. I want to project us from the here and now into the future. I'm going to wrap up the episode here. And, we're at Identiverse as this goes live. So, but we're not there physically yet, right? So we're going to use the power of time travel for the three of us. What is something that you are hoping to see at Identiverse this year? Is there a specific topic, any sort of trends that you want to see? I have to imagine like AI is going to be kind of everywhere in this idea of non-human identity, but like, what are you most looking forward to hearing more about at the Identiverse conference that we are all at right now?
Yes, here we are. So there's a ton of things. And yeah, you can't ignore AI. I think I'm interested to see what startups emerge around that agentic identity space. I'm already seeing a few really interesting ones. And from my vantage point at Cisco, I get a sneak peek into like what's going on in the startup industry. And that's pretty cool. The machine identity stuff, we've been talking about non-human identity for a couple of years now. There's been a crop of startups that came about. I'm really interested to see where that goes. Like, do we get beyond just visibility and observability there? Because it feels like we're there. Like, when are we going to get an IDP for machines? And when are we going to get an IDP for agents? And what are the sort of things that would make those happen? So then those things in particular are interesting. I think the identity governance problem is still very real. It's like we still don't have least privilege authorization. One hypothesis that I find super interesting that I'm going to be looking out for at Identiverse, or I am looking out for since we're there, is whether this agentic AI problem forces us to finally solve the hard problem of authorization that everybody's been kicking the can down the road on for so long, because it's hard. It's hard to figure out beyond the application level what permissions people should have and how to grant them and take them away in an instant. But with agents, like we were talking about, things can go wrong in an instant, and they can go wrong at scale, and it can cause really, really big problems if you don't have control over it. And I think we might finally see solutions to authorization that not just work for agents, but we actually get the benefit from them for humans as well. And it's going to make our lives easier and more secure.
Jim, what are you looking forward to at the Identiverse that we are currently at right now?
Yeah, well, look, I'm going to force the lighter note. I'm looking forward to improvements in the swag. I think it's very important that each booth give away something good. I don't need any more squeeze balls. I don't need one of those like window dealies that covers your camera when you don't want to be on camera. What I would like, I'm a fan of socks. Like, I think giving away socks is a good thing. I know that's not your thing.
I don't understand it. Everybody likes socks. I'm like, I have zero interest, less than zero interest. I would give them away if someone gave them to me.
So socks, I think, is good because You wear them a few times and then like you got them for free, so you can just throw them away. I think somebody should have scarves. Like, how much would it cost to have a custom scarf or do something a little bit different? You want to say you think different, then give away different swag at your booth. That's my pro tip.
Matt, any response to that as a vendor? Yeah.
No, I think the scarves in Vegas in June is like really that's going to be really good.
It's going to be like 100 degrees, or when you're listening to this, it's probably 100 degrees outside, but you get to stay inside in the air conditioning.
It's chilly. No, I'm with Jim though on socks. I love the socks. Sorry, Jeff.
No, hey, that's fine. Look, I know it's super popular. We have a lot of folks that have, expressed interest in that. I don't get it. I think the most important thing for any type of swag is that you don't want to be the piece of swag that gets left behind in the hotel room. Because I'm not going to use this thing. That's just a waste for everybody. So it also means that your swag was not memorable enough to throw in the suitcase or into the bag or whatever you're doing. So pro tip for all the vendors out there, right? Come up with something good.
Who I appreciate most are vendors who give me stuff that I can give to my kids as souvenirs. It just saves me a trip.
I was at RSA a few years back and somebody was giving out lightsabers. And so, of course, that was a very popular, giveaway for people. And I'll never forget getting onto the flight back home from San Francisco. And this at the time would have been going back to Chicago. It was a United flight. And I get on the flight and I just see a whole bunch of lightsabers in all the seats with all the people who had attended RSA. And they were carrying back this thing. I don't know what company it was, but it was a very memorable swag item. So, a unique memory as part of business travel of, getting on board with what I assume are a whole bunch of Jedi and Sith Lords, going back to Chicago. So you never know.
Hey, I should mention, though, Identity Center is recording. We got a booth in the expo hall, and we will have stickers. So even if we're recording and can't stop and talk, you can grab a sticker. And if we are there and we're not recording, we'd love to say hi.
Yep, always. All right, let's go to wrap it up. Matt, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart upon the global identity community that you're talking to? No pressure.
Okay. Check out the new Duo. Go to duo.com. There's Duo Identity Access Management is pretty cool. We've got a directory now. That's the big news. So go check that out. If it's not Thursday yet of Identiverse, check out my keynote on Thursday. I'll be talking in the morning, and if it's past that date, feel free to check out the recording of it afterwards. But no, that's I appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, Matt, it's always a pleasure having you here. We're going to give you a virtual fist bump for now and hopefully make that a real fist bump in a couple of days there. So we'll have links in our show notes, duo.com, duo.com, and connect with us on LinkedIn. And what else? Like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and show appreciation for the guests that we get on, like Matt. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Thanks, everyone, for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.